Hello, Melissa Crook here from the Field Podcast. Thanks so much for being with us today. We have for you Unapologetic Suburban Troublemaker with Ellen Smith as our episode today. This one's going to be a lot of fun. All right, for the ways to engage with this episode, think about the perceptions you have about different communities in your area or that you've come across in your life. Are these perceptions based on behavior you've experienced or stereotypes you've been told? Make sure the opinions you're forming are your own and are fair and accurate. Thanks so much for being with us. We hope this gives you a thoughtful list of ways to engage today with an apologetic suburban troublemaker with Ellen Smith. Take care and enjoy the episode. Hello, Field Podcast audience. Welcome back this week. I have got a new friend here with me today. Ellen Smith is here with me today, and Ellen reached out to me on her own. And I have so much respect for women who do that, who just take it upon themselves. I have done that in my early days of starting this podcast and trying to make connections. You find people that you are aligned with and that you think might be a great connect point for you and platform, and you just reach out and feel like, I got nothing to lose. I'm going to reach out. And that's exactly what Ellen did. And she shared with me her book, which we are going to talk a lot about today, but her book really is this podcast in so many ways in book form. And that might be confusing to some of you because you're like, didn't you release your own book in the fall? Yes, we did. And it's a recap of our first 4 seasons and all of the great wisdom that our guests provided. This is a living life version of that. And we're going to get into that today. And as we go through our talking points, we're going to share more about that. It's Memoirs of a Suburban Troublemaker, and it'll be linked on our website, but it is one of the smartest, authentic, organic reads I've had in a while. And it's written in memoir form, which is one of my favorite forms anyway. And Ellen really hits the nail on the head. And it's just really well done. So I'm excited to share this with her today because she talks about all the things in this book that we need to be talking about in our lives as women to show up for ourselves and others unapologetically and bring attention to the things that get in the way of us doing that and how we can heal and how we can fight for ourselves and how we can show up for each other. And by that, Ellen describes herself as quirky, boss bitch. She's not afraid to tackle hard conversations. She stands up for the underdog. She's very empathetic to them and their cause. She knows what it's like to be in that place. She's a fighter for anti-racism, anti-Semitism. She wants us to, and she uses so many great examples that I'm going to share today on those fronts from her book as we go through this conversation and you get to know her and get to know her story behind what made her decide to do this. And through it creates, I think, a voice for women in confronting the things that they always wanted to say out loud, but they didn't know if they could. And Ellen just goes there. I also think she has 9 lives, and you'll understand what I mean when she reads the book. But I'm thankful she does, because that means she's here with us today, and she's shared this book with the world. Ellen Smith, welcome to the Field Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. And that is wonderful feedback. You are correct. I had a lot more stories than my editor was like, we've got enough of these. I think we get it. But yeah, I really appreciate you having me on your show. And I really believe that women should empower other women. And this is such a good example of that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your book is a great avenue. I mean, I think it's the power of the written word. And it's so important to tap into that. And it's just such an avenue to reach others with. And I think that you've done that with the way you've so authentically, organically shared your story. But I want to start with the talking point of prioritizing self-care in your life. and what that has come to look like for you as you have unpacked. You learned by going through experiences and recognizing the parts that weren't working, recognizing the parts that needed to be healed, learning hard lessons along the way, and then the ability to forgive yourself, forgive others, and move on and be better. And sometimes it took a series of rounds to get through that. You've been able to do that, which is really not a gift everyone has. So talk to me about self-care in that form, because there was a stark change in your life when you were around 9 years old that really changed the trajectory of how you felt about yourself and your life and relationships and being loved and accepted, through what happened with your parents divorcing, through coming from a Jewish background that was you kind of describe it as an agnostic kind of Jewish background, but it was there nevertheless. And so even for the simple things and I say simple, but they're not simple, those things that we don't think about when our kids are in school, about what if not everybody in this room celebrates Christmas? And I personally love Christmas, but I'm also very aware that not everybody does, and not everybody wants to. And and so how that impacts us and our identity. I mean, you hit on so many things, and the ways that when we don't feel seen and heard, that we grab onto to self-soothe,
Right.
to take care of ourselves, to mask the pain, to try to be accepted. I mean, you nail everything. So I've covered a lot there, but talk to me about your journey with taking care of yourself in a way that's healthy and well for you.
Yeah. So when my parents divorced, I had gone through this depression over the death of their love for each other. And when you hear, people talk about divorce, it's kind of, it's a way that it's described. And for me, that's absolutely what it was. And, I felt like if were going to fall out of love with each other, then the same could be said for me.
Oh, yeah.
And so, in order to, prevent that feeling of being unwanted, I just kind of shut everybody out because I wanted that control, which ended up self-alienating me. So learning from all of those mistakes definitely taught me how to take care of myself. And just reaching out now, when I know that I need help with creating my own nuclear family that I craved for so many years, but also waiting until I found the right person, because I didn't want to make the same mistake that my parents made. And, and I get people falling out of love with each other. It's a different ball game when you have kids, and I'm not in other people's shoes. I don't want to be judgmental, but for myself, this was a permanent, marriage is a permanent, situation. So, so I needed to make the right decision. I was very careful in finding a partner. So that was one way of being careful, and then, creating that nuclear family so that I could be a part of it, and just taking that control back. So does that answer?
Well, I love that. No, I think that's, you pointed out some really important things, and you show some great examples in your book. We get this script and this narrative when we're little girls about the order of events as we go along. And this especially is true for our generation. It's changing now. I've got 3 daughters, and 2 in their 20s, one that just turned 30. And it's definitely changing. It's not the same as what we grew up with, but I think our generation, we have started telling our daughters, you don't have to follow that script. It's not, there are, listen to your heart, follow your own intuition, trust yourself. But with that, growing up, there was an expectation that you grow up, you behave yourself, graduate from high school, you go to college, you get the degree, you find the partner, you buy the house, you get the job, you have the kids, and
in that order.
In that order, exactly. And you live happily ever after. And anything outside of that script is not welcome, isn't considered successful. The generations before us wonder what's wrong with you. I say wrong with you with quotes because there's nothing wrong with you. And
Right.
and one of the first things that I told my daughters was, because I was hit with this so hard in my own life, it's like, you don't have to get married if you don't want
Yeah.
to. You don't have to have children if you don't want to. That does not make you any less of a woman.
Right.
If you want to, and those things are there for you and it unfolds in your life, great. But I don't want you to ever feel like you're any less or more based on making those decisions. And I've had them say to me, and I didn't do everything right, but that was one thing, like, we always
Yeah.
appreciated that you were absolutely adamant about that from a very early age, because
Yeah.
I knew they were going to hear all the things, and you had to hear all the things, but you trusted
Mhm.
your instincts enough to know what was right for you despite all the experiences. And that is a form
Mhm.
of self-care. That
Absolutely.
is a form of knowing yourself and trusting yourself to not get sucked in to the expectations of others, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and just the
Mhm.
cultural narratives that are out there and the questions you face every time you go to someone else's wedding or a family event. I mean, and
Right.
it still happens. I mean, but I think we're talking about it more, and there's more
Mhm.
awareness around it, and the pressure. And now, I mean, it's almost flipping in some ways. Like, some of my daughters, I mean, my daughters have all been in weddings, but
Right.
there's like a group that gets married right out of college. And then there's another group that doesn't get married for like another 10 years. And
Yeah.
that's normal now. Like, whereas
Yeah.
that wasn't normal
Thank
at all.
goodness.
Thank goodness. No kidding. Or just to not get married, period. I mean, but so it's shifting, but it's still a big part of the conversation. So I want to point out that being a form of self-care. Also, something you did really beautifully that you laid out so well, that I think happens so many times when we're growing up. And I think we're being more conscious about it now with this generation of parents with their kids. But when we were growing up, we were to be seen and not heard. Our emotions, there was not room or space for anyone to hear about, care about, ask us about, or tend to our emotions,
Right.
because we were dealing so many times with adults that didn't even know what to do with their own
Yeah.
versus anybody else's, because of generations of just, you keep
Right.
that to yourself. We don't talk about that outside of the home. You're,
Right.
you are to behave yourself and make sure everyone else around you. And so there's all of these things going on. And you think about it now, and you think about the kids that you remember from class that had hard time with school or were behaving badly or all these things. And you think of all the things that we didn't know that we know now about did anybody think to ask what was happening at home? Did
Right.
anybody, think to ask if, gosh, when you went to the doctor last time, did you ask your doctor about these things? You talk about your ADHD diagnoses.
Mhm.
And even now, I mean, I have one of my daughters has a friend that literally she didn't get her diagnosis until high school. And it's because it tends to be diagnosed. It shows up differently so many times in girls than it does boys. And so it can take, I know, a full grown adults. I had a woman as a guest that will be on um, in a few weeks, who she literally didn't get diagnosed until she was almost 40 and
Wow.
lived with it for years. I mean, so these are still things we're figuring out. And you do such a beautiful job of naming those things. And that's really hard to have good feelings about yourself when you're not giving tools or you feel seen and heard. When do you feel, and I've read your book, so I can kind
You're
of trace
stable.
it.
Yeah.
Exactly. But when did you kind of cross over to that space where it's like, I don't need to perform for anyone else anymore,
Yeah.
in bad ways or good ways? And you chose all the roads. um, so when was that point where you're like, no, yeah, I'm just showing up as me, and that's good.
I think there were several times, and I actually discussed this with my editor too, because she's like, where was the transformation? What was that pivotal
Yeah.
moment? And I told her, every time that I got knocked down, every time that I had to start over, when I got kicked out of high school and I had to go to a
Mhm.
new high school, that transition I proved to myself that I
Mhm.
could, you know, uh, get along with teachers, that I could make
Mhm.
new friends, and that I could survive.
Yeah.
And, it just kept happening. Like in college, when I was having these classes with 200 people, my ADHD was in full force.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I just needed, a smaller classroom. And I didn't learn that about myself until I started failing out. And it wasn't just because there was too many people in my classes. I was also, spending it all night playing spades and then skipping classes the next day.
Yeah.
But either way, I needed a smaller classroom. I went to Northern Virginia Community College. That transition of getting, the prereqs out of the way and then going back to school so I could focus on what I really wanted to do, what I thought I wanted to do at the time. It was psychology, and then knocking it out of the park and getting on that dean's list the last 4 semesters, the super senior year.
Yeah. I love that part of the story, though, not because of what you did, but because of how you did it and what you were able to show yourself through that. I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, the street preacher, I think, is also really, really pivotal, because it was like, all right, this is I'm 19 now. This is my permanent record. And if I go get arrested or go to jail, that never comes off. Whereas before, erased. So even though I was exonerated, I still wanted to make sure, like, it was just a brief window into what could have been getting pushed in the back of that cop car. Like, oh my God, am I going to jail?
Yeah.
Everybody was on my side, but no.
Yeah.
Luckily I got out of that one, but never again. There was never another physical altercation that landed me,
Yeah. And this is a story from the book. This is going to be good encouragement. If you're curious about that, get the book. And because it's that and many other stories are really worthwhile losing. And they are things that many of us face every day, all the time, that maybe we never talk about or process the trauma of. So that's a sneak peek. But all of those things are ways you recognize and grow into yourself. I loved how you talked about when you started taking the Zumba classes and you didn't let your unorthodox way of doing that and caring for yourself in that way, feeling good about yourself in that way, taking that love of music, love of singing and dance and movement. And even though it wasn't the typical way, there was a way in for you and a way to take care of yourself. I mean, you just found all these different ways to care for yourself throughout. And that you talk about, your sister Julie after having babies and pulling you out, like, all right, mama, it's time to get rid of the elastic jeans and let's get back out there and get going again. But all these different ways that people that matter to you, that showed up for you throughout your life, continue to show for you and helpful you care for yourself when you needed that boost or that lift, and how you did that for others. Like, so, I mean, I think when we talk about self-care, we talk about the exercise and the mental health, the emotional health, and those are very important parts of it. And those are things I talk about all the time and I value very much, but it's also the knowing yourself and trusting yourself well enough to take paths that are going to be healthy for you.
Right.
And lead you down a road of living your most authentic self, loved the way you deserve to be loved. So I love how you really set the stage for that from beginning to end in what you talk about and what you've shared here. Talk to me about confidently setting boundaries. You had no boundaries in a lot of areas, but then you also did have boundaries. Like, it was it was so interesting to me where some of your choices felt really unhinged, but then there were other choices that you were like, no, that's the line that I will not cross, and that you will not allow me to cross either. Like, I will not be pulled into that. So did you just have like an alarm in your head to let you know that? I think you walk that line in such an interesting way.
Yeah, I think just growing up, like, I don't know if I said this in the book, but I've definitely said it to others, that my brain didn't fully develop until my late 20s. Like, I definitely still had some, and even now, like, I am not a self-actualized top of the Rogers and Maslow hierarchy of needs. I'm nowhere near that. But I think all of the lessons, and setting boundaries and just being able to, like, for example, at work, blocking off my time at 5 o'clock to go home, make dinner, being able to just say, this is, time for me
my time
to,
here is done. I'm switching gears now. Yeah.
But it took me a really long time to learn that. And even though I set the boundaries, people didn't care. They still came, sent emails, escalated issues. And it was just the jobs that I had were so stressful. I think just, taking the payout and taking the time to write my book, that was probably the most that I've ever been able to say I took care of myself, because writing the book was cathartic. I was, basically traveling through time to conjure up all of these vivid memories and put them down on paper so that I could share these mistakes for others, with others, so that they don't make the same mistakes. And that's, I think, something really valuable. And I wish somebody had done that for me. And lots of people have in the form of memoirs, which I'm a big fan of them too, especially female comics. And I wanted to use comedy to kind of lighten up the mood, because there's a lot of dark topics. And you mentioned, not feeling included. I hate Christmas. Because it makes me think of my parents' divorce, not being able to have a Christmas tree until my parents got divorced, and they were like, "Oh, here's a consolation prize. You get one now." And it was just a little too late. And just the whole concept of commercialized love.
Absolutely.
So I think that just being able to put all of that stuff out there, these things happened, and I am trying to make the best of it and reframe it in order to say these are the things that happened for me instead of what happened to me. Has really shifted my mindset, and I think others too, because I've pulled a lot of people in, and getting the buy-in has been pretty difficult. But in the end, as you know, my mother did the forward, and she still doesn't completely agree with everything that I wrote. And that's very clear in her forward, but she still wrote it, and thinks it's a compelling memoir, and it's really been on my in my corner. And and I think that's also been very eye-opening for me in this process, is learning who is and who isn't. If you ever want to know, write a memoir.
Absolutely. It gets clear real quick. I can imagine. Well, and I think through this, you learned by learning who's for you and who's with you, that informs, okay, not so much time with these people. They're not safe. Not so much time in this space, this workspace anymore. It's bringing up a lot of stress and anxiety that I don't need to have in my life. It's time to step away and do something different and surround myself with spaces that do honor my time. Because you have been legendary in some of your workspaces. You have found ways and created systems and parameters that have changed jobs forever in some really meaningful spaces. You are definitely a self-starter, a go-getter, a game changer in so many ways. You've had all sorts of different types of spaces and places and people that you've worked with. Wonderful, demeaning, horrible, great, and supportive, the whole gamut of life's experiences. And through that too, I think that's probably really informed you. But I really love relationally how you really were able to be clear, even when it hurt, about who was for you and who was not going to be healthy for you in the long term. And even though it was painful, and even though it was hard, you were able to release those relationships that you knew weren't going to be for you in the long run. And that's a hard lesson to learn, but very important. I think that's an important part of boundaries. And sometimes we learn those things the hard way. And so taking those things you've learned from them, okay, all right, how do I establish some spaces and places for me here? I'm curious, and you don't have to answer this question, but I'm curious, you have daughters now. How, based on your experiences, how do you talk to them about, who they surround themselves with and being mindful of those things?
I just read a book, like How to Listen So Your Kids Will Talk and How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen. It's been such a game changer. I wish I had listened to, or I listen to books now because I don't have to read them. haven't read the book since before I gave birth, and I was reading Game of Thrones like front to back.
Oh, yeah.
Those were my last books.
Yeah.
But anyway, I listened to the books, and I wish I had listened to them earlier, because it really does give kids the opportunity to open up. I try not to, be judgmental right off the bat when they tell me about something that happened on the playground, and encourage kindness. But I also know, like, my heart got broken, and I feel like it helped me. If you don't have those lows, you can't have the highs, right? Like, it's kind of
And
like
you
just
can't protect them from all the pain.
protect them from that. And they, and when you're young, everything is so important. Like, just the littlest thing can just destroy your world. And it did for me. I looked at these journals of when I was an adolescent, and it's just like, oh, woe is me. These painful, diatribes. I'm just, I was very pathetic.
But also you needed a place to be heard. I want to go back to that, because when we don't feel like we have a voice, or anyone's hearing or seeing the why behind we're making decisions or doing things or showing up in a certain way, you got to have a place for it to go. So some ways that probably saved you.
Yeah. My mom gave me a journal at a very young age, and I thought it was because she wanted me to write things down to give her the feedback. Like, here's your report card, but she never read it. So I think that was another challenge of writing my memoir. I was like, okay, well, here's, almost 50 years of journaling.
Yeah.
But so with my kids, with my oldest, I have a diary called Mommy and Me, where she gets to write in it, and then she gives it to me, and then I write in it and give it back to her. So we're communicating not just verbally, but also in writing. And I think that's helpful. But, I'm going to make mistakes. Like, I don't have all the answers, but I do have a lot of experience, and I'm definitely, imparting that to them as much as possible, but also trying to listen to get a sense of, what are their struggles, what's really wrong, and how can I fix it? Because, as a mom, you just want to fix everything.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I was just saying, giving them the tools, and sometimes they just need to be heard.
Yeah.
And to know that their feelings matter.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And then listening, and then identifying that feeling, because naming the feeling takes the power out of it.
Yeah.
We listen to a lot of these psychology books, but yeah. So it's constantly evolving, and I think our culture is evolving too.
Yeah.
And trying to keep up with, what are the best practices for helping your kids, and knowing when to step back and say, okay, you've got this. I'm confident that you can figure this out, or you and your sister will, resolve this problem on your own.
Yeah.
That like the first time I said that, they looked at me like I was crazy, but it worked.
And just infuse that. There's a lot of power in infusing that confidence in them. I think parents too are asking a lot more intentional questions now. They're more open ended. They're not that yes, no, good, bad. Like, tell me the most exciting. Tell me about what was the hardest thing that happened today. What was the most interesting? What was the scariest? What was the happy? I think that they're, and that is then opening a door to have more meaningful conversations and get to the root of like, oh, that's why that mood was happening this morning, or that's why she snapped her sister's head off, or, whatever, the thing may be. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. I would imagine writing this book had a role in that, but talk to me about those connections, because they are connected. I mean, if we stuff and store and don't process, they show up in, you talk about openly in the book having an anger issue that was rooted in all these things that you weren't able to express, that no one was asking you about, or willing, or curious about, or willing to listen to. You're very pointed in pointing out times in your experience where teachers and educators and people in your life could have made different choices or shown up better.
Right.
or just not been downright evil in some
Yeah.
cases. And I have a world of teachers and educator friends out there that I love. This is not a knock
Right.
on that, but it's also naming things in society that happen sometimes in schools that need to be named when they come up,
Right.
and the damage it does to kids when it's not, when it's not done correctly, professionally, ethically, morally, all those kinds of
Right.
things, and the
Yeah.
impact that has on how kids, how safe we feel, and
Yeah.
the impact that it has on our safety as we grow up. And so, talk to me about this emotional, mental, physical health journey for you.
Yeah. I think every kid at some point realizes that they're not safe in school. I think, I don't know. I
Yeah.
felt it when I got slapped in the face in that story. I was, I think,
Yeah.
12
Yeah.
or 11. And that was so traumatic for me. And I think that really triggered this, my alter ego, which I
Yeah.
call is my anger,
Yeah.
that's who comes out. And
Yeah.
I'm not and I wasn't in control. And I thought I had it nipped in the bud with my anger managed therapy, but I'm 49. I've been going through menopause for about 5 years, and one of the symptoms is raging mood swings.
Oh
So it
man.
comes
Yeah.
out
I
every
know.
um,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to get a handle on it, but and I don't want to be this person that's like yelling at my kids and my husband. But every once in a while, I snap, and I think, therapy is good for everyone, no matter
Yeah.
where you are in your life. But I think talking to people, I think having a group of friends that you trust, having family that you can spend time with is really really good to just honestly going back to work. I mean, I just started a new job, and just being out of my house and having a purpose, that
Hmm.
and an income.
Yeah.
Has been really helpful, because for 2 years I've been, just heads down focused on the book. So just getting out and, pushing myself in different areas, doing art is so healing for me.
Mm.
I've been doing pottery, and I noticed
Mm.
a lot of people in my class are also going through something. And I think the
Yeah.
goal is to get back to Mother Earth and like play in the dirt, which I guess clay is.
Yeah. Yeah. And make that connection with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it has been like a game changer. And I don't think I could have written the book without it. Honestly, like
Yeah.
having that outlet and
Yeah.
turning that back on in my brain, like
Sure.
I don't have to solve everybody else's problems. I can just,
Yeah.
play with
And
mud.
it's not your responsibility to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And releasing that. I think too, it's very easy to see. And I wonder if this worked out for you as you wrote it. Were you able to go back and be like, because I talk about in layers a lot on
Yes.
here, and we'll get to it. I would
Yeah.
imagine this really helped you, like, ah, that's where this is rooted from, because there's so many experiences, and sometimes we forget,
Mhm.
gosh, where did this come from? I
Yeah.
remember it happening, but unpacking this, did that help
Yeah.
you kind of like, oh, that's the root of that, that's the part
Yeah.
that needs to be healed, that's the part of my inner
Yeah.
child that needs to be addressed so we can move on? Did that come up for you?
Yeah. Absolutely. There was in looking in my yearbooks, all of
Yeah.
the entries, like when people sign your yearbook, was all like,
Hmm.
"Oh, I hope everything is great with your boyfriend," and it was all about my boyfriend, every single one. And I was like, "Gosh, do I
Yeah.
even have an identity?" And I purposefully did not write one single story about him, except for I was cheated on. And
Yeah.
that is the reason why I have a problem trusting people. Also, my parents got divorced, and that, usually children from broken homes have that. But
Yeah.
really, it was being cheated on. And that really did uh, traumatize me and hurt me in a way that I don't know if I've ever healed from it, that kind of
Sure.
betrayal. But
Yeah.
I didn't want to write about it, because I didn't want to, I didn't want to focus on the negative. There wasn't really a learning lesson there, other than, it hurts.
Yeah. It hurts. And sometimes
Terrible
crappy
feeling.
things just happen. And
Yeah.
they just happen, and it might inform us of like, okay, I'm not going to put up with the cheater moving forward.
Yeah.
But
Right.
there, I think that that's some, we can overdo sometimes. Not that I don't believe this, but this whole there's a purpose for everything.
Right.
Maybe, but sometimes crappy things just happen.
Yeah. Going to the
I,
gynecologist and getting the
yeah,
STD panel or whatever, that was
yeah,
not fun. And I can't go
no,
there's a meaning to this other than it just sucked.
yeah,
And sometimes, life just sucks and you have to move on.
yeah,
Luckily, everything's clear.
yeah. It did,
But
and
it's
learning
good
about
enough, like
choices.
the stress of waiting
Uh,
and like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. And but I think so many times too, it's a point when you are grasping, when you haven't felt heard, when you've suffered a betrayal already earlier, even though your parents meant you no harm, it still felt like a
Yeah.
betrayal. You
Yeah.
start looking for people and places to be loved. And many times when you're coming at it from that unhealthy lens, it comes at a cost to you.
Yeah.
And because I made some of those decisions myself in my,
Yeah.
teenage and early 20s years. Or like, oof.
Yeah.
But it's also like, okay, that's why it's so important for me to understand I'm good. I don't need a
Right.
relation. And you talk about this a little bit in the book. I don't need a relationship to validate me or my
Mhm.
existence. I can take
Yeah.
care of myself well. I can be healthy on my own. No one else is
Mhm.
responsible for my health. And I'm not
Mhm. Yeah.
responsible for anybody other than our children when they're small. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking
Right.
about in general,
Yeah.
in relationships. And you were able to get to that point. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting when we can go back and kind of retrace our steps and be like, okay, instead of approaching this with judgment or shame or secrecy or like, what was I thinking? And
Right.
sometimes you can still doubt. It also is like, I can see where I got here. Not
Yeah.
a decision I would make again. Hope my kids don't do it, but also
Right.
completely understand. And I was able to, for me, when I was able to start approach things with curiosity rather than judgment, then
Mm.
it enabled me to do that. So thank you for sharing that. I think that is a really important lesson for us to all learn as we're learning how to, get okay with ourselves and make those connections between why am I so angry? Why am I
Mhm.
so, why do I have a headache? Why am I, what's
Right.
happening? What's the root of that? Get to that, recognize what's happening here, what needs to be healed and moved through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tune in. Yeah.
Tune in. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. How we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. You show up unapologetically. You really do. And I'm going to read a few excerpts from the book because they're examples of that. And I could have read a million, but I identified a couple that really stuck out to me that I want to share because they're just examples of you understanding this in some cases at a really early age. And there are all kinds of different examples. The first one is on page 60 of the book. And you talk about, my first thought was, why doesn't he like me? Then I thought, wait, does he like me? I remembered the old saying, if a boy is mean to you, it means he likes you. We heard this shit all the time.
Yeah. Oh, we probably got a question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, but you can catch my drift, is what you say in the book. I was overwhelmed with embarrassment that someone could hate me enough to do me harm, a feeling contrary to my overall existence up to this point. Maybe I had brought it on myself for thinking redheads were cute. You have to understand. Part of the book. Banking this trauma enhanced a disproportionate fight or flight response. The Zelda that you speak of, my
Mhm.
inner red-eyed demon was born. Like the birth of Aphrodite, who rose from the white foam produced by the severed genitals of Uranus, Zelda came into being from the white snow of whitewashing. The trauma at the hands of Steve O'Doyle, with my face plunged into the cold snow, became the trigger for my rage. If Audrina's voice was the angel on my shoulder, your good friend Audrina,
Mhm.
then Zelda's was the devil. This particular incident made me understand how hard it must be for victims of rape, sexual assault, and domestic violence to come forward. Why are women are expected to keep quiet and made to believe it's our fault? The sentiment that boys like you, when they are mean to you, primes little girls to accept abuse and programs the association of romance with violence and bad behavior. So many of us have the story of the bad boy we dated.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh. We have to stop spreading this misogynistic propaganda and stand up for one another. So I love that. And this is something you became aware of at an early age. I mean, I think that's what is so remarkable. There's a couple more. I'm trying to find my earmarks here, because it just shows your ability to know the importance to pick out the truths in really hard situations and enable you to show up unapologetically. Okay. I thought this was really good. Robbie introduced me to his German friend, Sonia Hoffman. Sonia and I connected immediately. Our common ground was a mutual obsession with sushi. We found all-you-could-eat sushi joint located 40 city blocks south of my apartment when you lived in New York. We ate as much rice as we could and realized the fish was the best part and the rice was filling us up like birds who exploded and forced everyone to start throwing confetti at weddings instead. And what I loved about this story is you share about this friendship. And at the end of this towards the end of this chapter, you say, I always thought Germans hated me because of your Jewish background. But as it turns out, German people are nice. Only hateful people hate me for being Jewish. And they probably have a lot of hate for a lot of people for a myriad of reasons. I'm like, oh, that is some serious wisdom dropped. So I wanted to share that. And then there's one.
That was a beautiful friendship too. We're still friends. That's
wonderful.
Yeah. She and Andrea Buring, the other German story, let me use their real names. And in fact, Andrea sent me all these notes and gifts and voicemails about how thankful she was to be included. But collective Schuld is that concept. And I actually, I have two German brothers, but I mean, growing up, it was, don't get a German car. Everybody who's German hate, they're Nazis and they hate you. And I ended up getting a Volkswagen at some point.
But isn't what an amazing life lesson, in terms of these boxes that we put people in and these expectations that are set that aren't necessarily accurate, but we treat them as truth, that are fear-based, based out of partial truths.
Right.
And we carry them on for generations. So I wanted to share that. And then there was one last thing that I really loved. I was proud of myself for having the audacity to believe I belonged in the city and the self-preservation to know when to move on. New York taught me how to win and how to fail with grace. The failure stung, but they helped me see that I could do more difficult things. I gave it my best shot, and I'm proud of having the courage to chase my Sex in the City dreams. Failure gave me the confidence to know when to leave, which was the best decision for me. I was thrown into the fire in my very first real job out of college. It was a male-dominated, misogynistic environment. I took some hits, but I still thrived. I think there's so much in that paragraph about what you learn about yourself, about what to take with you from life's experiences, life's choices, how you can use them to empower you. There's just so much in that. And that to me really sums up. I wanted to share bits of your wisdom that you had at a very early age and insights that you had and were able to capture. And also, and there's a myriad of others where you point out blatant racism, blatant sexism, blatant abuses in various ways, blatant hypocrisies. I mean, and so, and it's just so, you talk, and going back to your college days and your college boyfriend, who's, was this devout Christian in quotes, but repeatedly slept with other women and cheated. And I was like, that's so interesting. And so it's like, and you name those things, which, I mean, we talked about before, and you mentioned this at the end of your book. We talked about it before we started recording about this fear of TMI and too much information and what that's going to do. And the problem for women is there's been so many things we've been told we can't talk about that are inappropriate, that aren't okay. They're going to upset the apple cart, that we aren't supposed to show up as da-da-da-da-da. That's completely hamstrung us. And it's
Yeah.
pitted us against each other for centuries. And we
Yeah.
have to take those things down. We have to name the things that are harming us. And we've got to hear each other's stories, listen to each other's stories, recognize our own prejudices, recognize our own privileges, and
Right.
find ways to lift up and support those that don't have the same platforms and spaces and places, which you have several examples where you show up for the underdog in different ways, and people showed up for you from
Yes.
all different backgrounds, from all different ethnicities, races, spaces. And you had enough of that happening when you grew up that when you saw it in college, you named it and you
Yeah.
kicked it out of your room. But
That's
you were
right.
able to but you were able to take those. And so this is examples of how you have showed up unapologetically from a very early age. And
Yeah.
and now you have taken this and you're showing up unapologetically for others, not just through your book, but choices you make, how you live your life, how you support those around you and invite them back in, your ability to go back and forgive after years. You have a great balance of accountability, naming the problem in that person's behavior that caused you pain, but also your accountability in the process as well. I mean, it's I've told you before we start recording, you really walked that line really well.
Yeah.
So in all of that, when did you decide? Because this, like I said, you have shown up unapologetically for years. I mean, your examples of when you lived in that neighborhood that you should have never moved into, but we've all been guilty of that, I think, at some time or another. Hand raised here, know what you're talking about. And you still found a way to stand up and find a few friends and allies in it, but also knew when it was time to leave. So you have all these examples. When did you decide it was time to write this and share this with the world in this book and show up unapologetically at a whole other level?
It's funny because I spent probably 6 months writing a completely different book. I was writing a book about Reston, Virginia, because I was so inspired by Bob Simon, the founder of Reston's Story, it was like a grandfather I always wanted. And it reminds me a lot of my late papa. But but I had interviewed people. I wanted to have a good demographic of what I think Reston is based on, which is diverse voices. And so I had all of these stories, and then I had them intertwined with my own. And my editor was just like, there is a story. And she was the one actually that helped me, say, you have figured out what this is about, but, don't tell somebody else's story, tell your own. And I think just having this woman, her name is Malka, empower me to be like, my story is good enough on its own. And the pre-readers that I had kept saying, I love Reston too. I grew up in Reston, but I'm skipping those parts to get to your story. So that I think was a huge shift in my confidence. Just sitting, it was 175,000 words, which is like 600 pages. So I cut it in half. Like you talk about layering, like I would go to sleep and think about like one storyline and how I need to tie it up or, make it relevant to the overall troublemaker gone to fighting for myself, to fighting for others and to complete that thought. And that's how I did it. I would just wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh, I need to, the cat in the bag thing that came up several times. And I was like, oh, wouldn't that be funny if I just did it like that? So I try to, do it with jokes, but I also try to do it with more overarching themes of, being there for other women. Like there's a spot at the table for everyone. We just have to, relax, and we don't need to hoard all the information for credit purposes. Just do your job, show up, and, foster an inclusive environment, and things will work out. That's the message that I was trying to relay. And it's really hard to, lecture the world. Like I had a theme about ethnocentrism and trying to avoid places where everybody, like in Maplewood, looks the same. But it's hard to do that without sounding like, you're lecturing somebody.
Exactly.
So that was the trick. And I hope I figured it out, but I don't know.
No, I would tell you 100%. Like I am in the middle. Like a lot of my guests write books. And so I try to read most, if not all of
Yeah.
them, at least partials, beforehand. And so this is one of 4 books I'm reading right now. I devoured this in less than 24 hours. And I'm a quick
wow.
reader, but I
Yeah.
also couldn't put it down because you hit the nail on the head. We can show up with lectures and statistics, but the way to hit a point home is with a story, because then you're living that person's truth. You're living that person's experience. And multiple times I was just like, oh, wow, she named it. She named it. And it's exactly what was happening. And what if we just all took the time to name it and address it and speak truth to it? And instead of believing these stereotypes and these tropes and these stigmas and all of this fear that's used to try to discourage us from doing that. And so that
and to oppress us.
Absolutely. Exactly. And keep us back and hold us back and keep us from being all that we were created to be in community together, not fighting each other for the one spot at the table. And this, I think it's really important to mention this. And I think it's, you and I are both married, happily married partners that love us and accept us for exactly who we are. And I say that because this isn't about moving men out. This is simply about creating spaces for women as well, along with, because all of our voices need to be represented, and we all have something to bring and offer, and half the population should not be left out of the discussion. And that's happened for too many years. And so, and I think in so many ways, your way of just simply sharing your stories and pointing out what was happening within that, and the way you do it with the chapters is really well done. So I wanted to, and it really is unapologetically showing up and really giving people like, those are the right questions to ask. Oh, that is happening. Or I understand what she's saying now, because I talked to you about, I'm a few years older than you, but a lot of the pop culture references, I was like, oh yeah. Related wholeheartedly to, the Sinead O'Connor examples, the friend that loved you too. I mean, all those kinds of things. I'm like, but all those things within that, things that were happening at the time, things that we had access to that were ridiculous. And also, but just within those moments, that you naming truths within them, you do that really well. So I wanted to talk about that. And yes, this is an invitation to everyone. When you're getting on there to buy our book, Embracing Layers Unapologetically, grab this one as well, because it's a different way of approaching being well and showing up unapologetically. Okay. The importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values in everything you do. You have a very much that's been with you since you were very young. The appetite and notion and desire to show up for the underdog and stick up for the person that's being bullied, that's being hurt. That's a core value of yours that came early. And so talk to me about your why and your values that have informed the choices you've made in your life and on the road you're on today.
Sure. Yeah. I've always had a really strong sense of justice, even before divorce. But I think, being bullied myself showed me how awful it was. And feeling that, that moment of paralysis of fear. I never wanted that to happen again to me. And that's how Zelda appeared. And then I also never wanted to happen to anyone else, because I know how bad it was. So having an inspiration like my mom, and she told a story about how she was threatened on the playground, and 12 bullies were trying to get to her, and then she took them all out. And I'm like, if she can, defend herself against 12 bullies, and I can certainly do it against one. And then my friend Bahija, who's still in my life right now, her
what a blessing she was.
Yeah. I mean, like, I tell her that all the time, like, you were my savior. Like, if it wasn't for you, I don't know what I would have done, because, and she had a terrible time. She was severely abused. her house was such a war zone, and that was just 4 doors down. I had no idea, but I knew she was going through something. But
Yeah.
seeing her, like as a friend, as a mentor, as an older sister figure,
Mhm.
seeing her stand up for me and like escort me to my school and then backtrack to get to her school because she was older. Um, that really inspired me
Yeah.
to do it too. Because I thought if she can do it, then so can I. And I think
Yeah.
that's just all you need is an example of
Yeah.
somebody else. So I try to lead by example. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
you
think,
have different examples of that you're really good about sharing, but then you turn around and you can see later how it inspired you to then be that person. It's really that notion of paying it
mm,
forward,
yeah,
and how we can take care of each other through that. Um, Accepting, before we get to that, living out of your own expectations versus others. I
yeah,
want to, I love, tell me about your journey with this. And I kind of know,
yeah,
but I want you to share this with
yeah.
our listeners.
I fully expected to be famous by now. Like,
And I feel like we should bring you back and have you sing to us because you talk about
yeah.
that so much.
Well, for the book, I mean, like I thought I'd be back on Hoda and Jenna, like, Reese's book club, Oprah's book club, like all of them. I thought,
This is a
and
great candidate for Reese's book
I
club.
think so too.
It would
Um,
you and my friend Vashti Khanna Haley, who also wrote
yeah,
a wonderful book that I have shared on the podcast. Both of your books, I fully believe, and they're very different books, but they're both your
yeah,
stories in a very powerful way. And they are so yeah. So Reese, not
yeah,
only you know, not only am I coming at you with Vashti's book, I'm also coming at you now, and in the most kind, loving way because I adore you with
yeah,
Ellen's
yeah.
book.
It's funny because like growing up, I didn't feel intelligent. Like I had the learning disability that wasn't diagnosed until I was an adolescent. Like, but I always had confidence that I could do things. I just needed the opportunity. And I kind of feel like
Yeah,
right now, I don't feel stupid anymore because I've been able to prove myself in so many ways.
sure.
And writing this book was a huge accomplishment. Um,
Yeah.
considering, for a while, like I couldn't even pass English in college.
Well,
So
and let's stop there for a minute.
yeah,
This is you are a kid, and you share this in the book, so I think it's okay to speak to it. That you were
yeah,
diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia.
yeah.
So writing a book? Oh my
And
gosh!
reading it. And
And
I didn't
yeah,
realize that I still had dyslexia until I did the Audible version because I was stopping like
wow.
every other sentence and just stumbling over my words trying to read them. And when my mother did it,
Yeah,
her forward, I mean, she knocked it out of the park. And I was like, damn, I thought I'd gotten my dyslexia from her, but I didn't. That's just me.
uh,
But yeah, I'm still, struggling with that. But I got through it. I finished it,
yeah,
and I'm going to keep pushing it because I think that this is the book the world needs right now, especially America.
yeah.
And
Oh
I'm going to
boy.
keep promoting it. And it's, that's why I took a part-time job because the other half of my job is going to be standing up for myself
Yeah,
and getting it out there because I need to break through the barrier of my friends and family.
yeah.
Because I've written this great book and I really would like people to read it.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Like I said, I devoured it. In terms of, but you have been really mindful. When you turned 30 and your family threw you your 30th birthday party and your
Yeah,
grandma and you're doing really well. You're very
yeah,
successful. You were able
mhm,
to buy your own condo in your 20s and you were able to have this
mhm.
great job. We're very successful. And your grandma still wanted to know when you were going to get married.
Oh yeah,
It's like, and you're just like, I am not going to let other people's expectations derail me. I am not going
yeah,
to settle and marry
right,
someone that I can marry, but isn't going to be good for either one of us long term. I mean,
yeah,
so I think you understood that when you said goodbye to your college boyfriend, you
yeah,
were budding expectations. You could kept it going back, or you could have,
oh,
converted to Christianity, all these different things that came up in that
right,
relationship to try to make that be the thing. But you knew
right,
something in you knew better. to stick to
Yeah.
trust yourself. So I think you've got
Yeah.
a lot of lists of living out of your own expectations versus others. Do you feel
Yeah.
like that for yourself? Do you feel like you have
Yeah.
good? Yeah.
Absolutely. Like there was, I call it like a little voice in my head that was like
Hmm.
telling me, like, you can do this. You can, find somebody that
Yeah.
accepts you for who you are, and will
Yeah.
love you, for that. I listen to that voice because there's so many voices that come
Oh
in your head.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
especially when you come from, I mean, you talk about faith spaces coming from, even, there are a lot of faith spaces, Christianity, Judaism, Catholicism, just even ethnicity wise,
yeah.
Italian, Greek, they have a lot of Latino, have a lot
Yeah.
of cultural expectations on how
Right.
you should show up in the world. And it's really tricky to find your own space and voice and trust it for your own wellness within that. And so,
Right.
but you were able to do that. Do you have someone that you knew that? Do you have, are there examples that you can think of that really, I have ideas in my head, but I don't want to impose those on you. So I want you to tell me your own that really helps send you the message that that was the right way to go, the good way to go, the important way to go,
For writing the book or
or
for
for
just
just living out of your own expectations in general. Yeah.
um yeah, I mean, like I've made a lot of mistakes and I really feel like I learned from them. I definitely wouldn't take those back. I wouldn't go back in time and change anything.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
so I think everything, that I went through had, most of the things had meaning. But yeah, I mean, my sister is amazing. She's always been, a huge, uh, advocate and supporter of my life choices.
Hmm. Yeah, and you guys are
um,
very different. Like you guys took a
different.
different coping route, and I would
Yeah,
say, just meeting your sister through your book. I don't want to speak for her, but I
yeah,
recognize the route she chose because
yeah,
that's the kind of the route for coping. So
right,
but you always loved each other through it.
yeah. And I think it brought us closer too.
Yeah,
Um, Going through that and just like all those events that we went to, and it was just us when everybody else had their whole family there. I think that made
yeah,
us stronger individuals.
yeah,
Even though we had each other, we've leaned on each other throughout our lives, and continue to do so. Like my daughter just had surgery on Friday, and she was
mm,
here Tuesday all day taking care of her so that I could go to my new job.
mm.
So yeah,
I
I
love
think that's
that.
the question you asked. I'm not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
like showing up for each other no matter what and
yeah,
supporting each other in choices and you each lived out of your own expectations and did it
yeah,
your way. And I
right.
think that when you're able to show up like that unapologetic for each other, it's empowering and it's also an invitation to others to do the same. I mean,
Oh yeah,
like, I think that's the thing that's we don't always anticipate was like, no, your example is an invitation. And I think
yeah,
that's a really important part too that people look for and they realize. Talk to me about accepting the layered aspects of yourself. I think the way you've laid this out in your book, I feel like you've done that really beautifully. And I've
yeah,
said this multiple times and I'm going to say it again. You do a great job of walking that line of this was happening. I didn't feel heard. The divorce really crushed me. I craved nuclear family. I was jealous and envious and also loved anybody who had one. As a
yeah,
consequence, these are the choices I made. But also owning that they were coping
yeah,
mechanisms and things that were wrong and how, and you still realized, you're able to look back now as an adult and realize my mom and dad didn't not love me. They were trying to make
right.
choices for themselves, but unfortunately, they had a really tough impact, and how they navigated them had a really tough impact on me.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
you walk that line really well of like walking out all those layers, all those seasons and spaces in your
right,
life of both owning them, seeing how they impacted the choices you made, and also
right,
be able to move forward from them in a healthy way, be able to see
right.
people from the lens of where they were making their decisions. I think you
Yeah.
just balance that really well.
Yeah. Well, my dad, when he read the book, said, "You were very fair to both of us, my
Oh,
mom and my dad." So
wow.
that was pretty cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think, just um, growing up and realizing that your parents are humans too,
Yeah.
was a hard lesson, because when you're young, you see the world of your parents. Like, I just thought they were always going to be there in that capacity for me as, my, and that love, for all of us, for each other
Mhm.
and for, their children. I thought that was always going to be there. And I guess, I guess I took it for granted. I don't,
Yeah. Well,
but,
I mean, but I think that's
but
not
yeah,
an unreasonable thing for a child to expect at that point,
yeah, yeah. But
and
just the lesson of, oh my God, my mom was struggling. She was trying
yeah.
to, get a better, um, a better life, a better job, and enhance her socioeconomic status, from that of her family,
Yeah,
because she
and
grew up in
change generational trauma.
Philadelphia.
Like, she was really trying to
Yeah. Oh
interrupt the
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So that, and then there's a show called Transparent, that
Mm.
I don't know if you've seen it, but they talk
Mm-mm.
about transcendental trauma up from the Holocaust. Like, I
Mm.
think,
Oh,
like,
wow.
learning about the Holocaust at a young age, having that Judaic heritage, there was always something, that, whenever I thought about being Jewish, like, I didn't want to tell people right away because
Yeah.
I didn't know if I could
Well,
trust
especially
them. And,
when you went to University of Tennessee, I was just like, "Oh, he's gonna go straight into the fire." Oh my
yeah, well, I
gosh.
mean, because growing up, I wouldn't tell people, like,
Yeah.
I didn't want anyone to know because I didn't want to be different. I wanted to fit in.
Yeah.
And now what I realize is you don't have to fit in and be,
Yeah.
and, you can, and you don't even have to be, what everybody else considers the religion. Like, I remember in college, I was like, I'm agnostic. I'm not Jewish because I don't believe in God. Because I think if there was somebody watching over us, then the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. And there's several others example of that. And I know, really religious people, especially Jewish people, are like, well, that could be offensive, and I'm sorry, but that's how I feel,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's
that's
your
how I,
lived experience.
yeah, that's how I, process that information. Um, so I think, being able to go through the emotions, because I don't think that many Jewish people have been able to do that, to look at, the
Yeah.
history and be able to say, okay, how do I feel about that, and what am I going to do about it? And for me, it's like, I'm just, that was the first sentence of my book. I am an agnostic, non-practicing Jewish person on a quest
Yeah.
to, conquer anti-Semitism and racism, because that is like the whole goal of the book and my life, really, is just
Yeah.
to show people, hey, I'm a nice person, and you should associate these positive things with also being Jewish, so that I can hear it. But
Yeah, and not all of the stereotypes. And in slang, I mean, you talk about that job you had where somebody said one of those
yeah,
offhanded slang things
yeah,
about,
yeah,
and you just walked right out of there. And that's what I mean about you. Like, you had a sense of, you knew there was a line for you that I have a lot of
yeah,
respect for, that you always knew, like, nope, you crossed the line. I'm out.
yeah.
That's
I
not
don't need a
okay.
job that bad.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, but just
Yeah,
identifying those things, and those are, they're microaggressions. Those are little
yeah,
microaggressions that add up, to have an impact about how we feel about our safety. And
yeah,
there's all kinds of different ways that they can show up. And that's, I mean, that's an example of that. And I think we spend too much, from all different backgrounds of people, too much time minimizing those things and not talking enough about creating safe spaces for everyone, seeing, sharing stories, understanding people's stories, learning to accept people as humans through their stories, through their lived experiences, rather than creating all these notions about things that we don't know anything about, and trying to put
yeah,
everybody in a box that doesn't fit.
yeah,
Because I love the way you still honor many Jewish traditions and invite people into that as a way of inviting different people from different
that's
backgrounds to
right.
give them an appreciation. There's a lot of value in that. And the
Yeah,
fact you can still honor these traditions, unite people and bring them together. It doesn't have to look one way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really
We do it every
important.
year. We still have, sometimes we just limit it to family, but when we have the resources, we'll pull in people that have never been to a Passover Seder before and let them experience it.
Yeah.
And we specifically target people that have not been to a Passover Seder before.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the invitation that creates. If we could create more invitations like that and reach across rather than pushing away, I mean, I think we could just create a whole different dynamic and dialogue. And that's going to be more and more important right now to do those kinds of things. We have to keep doing those kinds of things. We can't back away from it, fearfully. We have to keep being voices in the room for that and advocating for that. All right. And which, just as another example of you living out of your own expectations versus others, you didn't allow the fact that you were an agnostic Jew keep you from celebrating these things that you knew could be a unifier.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And also just the way you've been able to accept those layered aspects of yourself, use them as tools. That last chapter that I read, that was accepting layers in a nutshell. And you've laid that out so well. So thank you for that. I'm just, so many examples. We could talk about this all day. And I'm hoping this is going to encourage people to go grab the book. So they're like, what is Melissa talking about? It's right here. Go get it. All right. In summary, living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, which you have done. Talk to me about the impact that has had on your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with other people.
Yeah, I think, in the beginning of my career, I had to learn the lesson, and every job you have to go to work and you have to prove yourself, that you're a hard worker, and you can't just expect that, people are going to respect you right away.
Yeah.
But for me, I know, I like to connect with people right away. No matter what their background is, I want to let everyone know, like, hey, I'm safe. I'm on your side.
Yeah.
As long as you're not trying to oppress or hurt somebody else. Like I want people to know that I'm friendly. But at the same time, if I sense that a relationship, whether professional or personal, is becoming toxic, knowing when to cut those ties comes from that experience of going through all of those, relationships, romantic relationships, friends, that have shown me, that they're not in my corner by, just not sticking up for me. And, not everybody has to agree with everything that that I feel or that I say. But if the relationship is to a point where, that I don't feel good about myself when I know that we're going to hang out or that we're about to get on the phone together or after, and, I have to take a look at it and decide, is this, a relationship worth having? And in business, you don't have to be friends with everybody, but you do have to be friendly and you have to get along. And if somebody is just icing you out or being disrespectful, that behavior needs to be called out and escalated. Luckily the job that I have right now, it's, everybody's happy to be there. Good. A bunch of artists. So and my job or my goal for 2025 is to get a job where I'm either making the world a better place through politics or, serving on a charity board or consulting to help empower women, or something associated with art, which I believe indirectly impacts the world in a positive way.
Absolutely.
So those were my goals and I achieved it. And I think knowing that about myself, knowing that that was my way to find happiness and peace, was a huge turning point for me. And in order to do that, I had to go through my archives of my past, write it down, and, just kind of reflect on everything that I've done so that I can figure out what I want to do with the next chapter.
The next season. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for that. We're down to the rapid fire here at the end. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Okay. I did write this. Okay, so I loved Audible books, listening to books. I love prioritizing my sanity over financial gain. Time with my family and friends. And I'm a person that, like, if I know that there's a bunch of stuff to do, I'll write a to-do list and I'll write little boxes next to them. And I love checking those boxes. That's another thing. Being able, I get it off my like the monkey's off my back.
Yeah. Oh, I get that. 100%.
Okay.
That's awesome. And I think being able to check those things off is really powerful.
Yeah, it feels great.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there are days where I don't check it all off, but at least I tried. And then I have, ADHD people usually have a problem getting organized. So this was the way that I found that I have to do this. Otherwise it'll go through the cracks and I'll never get done.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is like, make a doctor's appointment for myself.
Yeah. Oh, that's,
power.
Yeah. Well, and you're in that busy season where you've got kiddos, you're working, you're a partner. There's a lot of things going on. You've got a book out there. There's a lot of things happening. So I think it's good when it's like, okay, this is what works for me. This is going to allow me to maintain my sanity, to know I'm on top of things, to know, and just that gratification that comes from checking that thing off the list. You've taken care of it. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back to the art piece too. I think creativity in all of its forms, we don't talk about the power of that, the healing power of that, the ability to find our voice in that. And I think that it's such an important piece to tapping into. And creativity, I think for years, and I think especially in our generation, we grew up in a generation, and if you went to art class, you got graded, either you were, and not everybody is talented by at art per se. So I was one of those kids that I tried my best, and I still got a C in art. It was my only C in junior high, and I was so mad, and it was so derailing. And for years, I wouldn't go near anything. Like, that's just not my gig, because it was just like, and it wasn't things I loved anyway, but I tried so hard, and it really was a dejecting thing. And so for years, I said, I'm just not creative. I'm just not creative.
It was a terrible teacher is what it was.
It was absolutely was. And those things happen. And so for years I lived in this, and I didn't see my creativity for what it was. Yes, I sang growing up. I was in choir. I sang at weddings and funerals and different things. And I'm like, well, I can carry a tune. That's where my creativity shows up. And that's not true. But as I've developed this podcast and have been part of getting a book out there, I'm like, that's where my creativity lies. Like, I will wake up in the middle of the night with all of these ideas. And so I think it's really important to tap into that whatever your creativity is. You have found the pottery, but tap into that space that allows you to just show up, think freely, and don't put a box around what's creativity, and don't decide you have to be a Picasso and whatever it is for you to be creative or to show up creating.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up singing, because I think, when I suffer from panic attacks, I have anxiety. Like I think most people do. Yeah. So, but singing is a way to breathe correctly.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, like, when I start, like, whenever I'm driving on the road and there's like a big Mack truck next to me and I feel like I'm going to hit a Jersey wall, I just sing at the top of my lungs. And I swear it takes all of the cortisol out of my system. And
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'll have my favorite playlist going. And if I'm driving and we have music on, we have been road trippers. We've lived all over the country. We've driven, I've been to 48 of 50 states, all the things. And music and having that playlist and singing at the top of my lungs has been an important part of my resettling my nervous system, creating a space where I feel safe. My husband and I both, he doesn't sing, but he loves, music is a really powerful force in our lives, and drawing in and pulling in those songs that allow us to articulate our feelings. I think, so find those spaces and places that are because that's a form of self-care. We were talking
Yeah.
about self-care. These are all forms of taking care
Breathing.
of yourself. Breathing, yes. I mean,
when you're having those panic attacks, you're not breathing.
You're not breathing. It's one of the first things you have that I learned to do when I finally really named my partner anxiety for what she was in my life. I didn't identify myself as it, named it as a component of my existence, but but I had a series of, I still have them occasionally, not as frequent as I did, but also you recognize them. And immediately I'm like, okay, some deep breathing. We're going to resettle. We're going to remind my system I'm safe, and remind whatever has triggered this situation that has triggered come up. I got to, reset it. We hold our breath, and we don't we breathe shallow when we don't even know it, when we're stressed. So these are all components of self-care. They're all components of things that nourish us that we need to remember. So thank you for sharing that all. We kind of got, it's not so much a rapid fire, but I think we talked about some important things there. So thank you so much for that. Yeah. All right. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Okay. So I wrote famous.
I love that so much. I love that you just own that, because I hear you. Like, it's just like, I can imagine myself. And I was so crushed when Hoda decided to leave. I'm like, I'm never going to meet her.
I know. My husband went to Virginia Tech. And when I first started, as long as I get to meet Hoda, I'll support you in this. That was the first thing he said. So, let's see. Why did I write? I think I wrote. Oh, here it is. Peace. I'd like to feel peace. I'd like to be in shape. I'm not in great shape, but I'd like to be hormonally stable.
I hear you. It's a journey.
And I want to be rich in community. And I know that's more than one word, but I feel like if I just said community, it doesn't really make sense. But I think I talked about this earlier, of how I found this community in art. And Reston. But Reston isn't my hometown. I mean, it's my hometown, but I don't live there anymore. Right. So I'm trying to recreate that in my new job. And I just, I got so much strength and I feel like I had a lot to offer, others in the community. So I want to do that again, but I want it to be bigger. I want a larger community, because I think, that just makes my life more rich.
Absolutely. And it's so important to be in community and have those places where you feel safe, seen, heard, known, and belong, and inviting people into those spaces. Thank you so much for that. All right. Tell people where they can find this book, Memoirs of the Suburban Troublemaker. Let people know where to find it, and all the ways they can follow you, know more about you, all those things. Don't worry, folks. This is going to be on our website, embracinglayers.com, on the resource page. You're going to be able to get access to it, but share a little bit about that before we wrap up today.
My website is Ellen R.B. Smith, which I've been updating with some of my art pieces too.
Nice.
But it's on Audible, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. I mean, you can pretty much find it anywhere in the library in Fairfax County, Virginia. And my handles are Suburban Troublemaker, pretty much everywhere. I've got a YouTube, Instagram, Blue Sky. I just signed up for that one. And I guess Threads is all, and they're all the same now, right? Threads and Instagram and Facebook. Yeah. It's all ellenrbsmith.com or Suburban Troublemaker.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm so thankful you reached out to me. I'm so thankful you shared your book with me, and that I had a chance to go on this journey with you. These stories are powerful. They're connectors. People, get curious, learn about people that come from different spaces, places, backgrounds than you. Get to know their stories, make those connections with people, create safe harbors for yourself and with others. I think that's just going to be such an important piece for us in this time in the world, and especially for women. And so thank you for being one of those safe harbors and for yourself and for others. I appreciate that so much.
Well, thank you so much for responding.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was immediately intrigued. He said suburban troublemaker. I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I gotta get a hold of this.
Yeah.
Oh,
I wish you lived down the street so we can like hang out.
I know. I love this so much. I know we'll have to find other ways to connect. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate your time today. And again, listeners, go get the book. While you're getting our book, Embracing Layers Unapologetically, to share with your community, get this one too. It's just such a great read and such a, it just speaks truth. And it's really, it's encouraging to others to speak their truth too. And to get honest with yourselves and get okay with your layers and meeting yourself where you are and coming to grips with where you came from and the people in your lives and their stories too. And it's just, it's rich, full of those kinds of things. So thank you so much again. Take good care of yourselves this week, ladies. And again, be a safe harbor for yourself and for others. We appreciate you. We'll be back with you next week. Have a great week. Hello, Melissa Crook here. Thank you so much for joining us on the Field podcast today, Finding Empowerment, Embracing Layers. I hope you found today's framework and resources supportive and informative. To learn more about all that we offer here at the Embracing Layers Network, visit embracinglayers.com. You can go to our contact form to schedule me as a speaker for your next conference, workshop, or seminar. You can go to our book page to order our book that Jessica Garrison, our wonderful and talented writer and author, authored with my support. And engage with this framework in written form, with your journal or in a book club with other women, inviting them on this journey with you. You can look at our resources page for all of the helpful and insightful resources our guests offer and share. You can find a schedule for our weekly Together We Feel women's panel conversations that we're holding each Monday on our YouTube channel. And you can find the links to all the spaces and places you can follow, engage with us on social media, and join our engagements that are happening on our Substack site. There is also a donation page where you can donate to support our work to ensure we can continue to bring you these incredible guests, conversations, and support. Thanks again for joining me this week. Share with your friends and give us a review on your favorite listening platform. Your feedback helps us ensure we're bringing you the content that will best support you and having an empowered, embracing layers journey. Take good care, and thanks for giving us some of your valuable time today. We truly appreciate you so deeply.